A fond greetings to all you viewers, and I bid you welcome to Magilim's Monstrous Musings. Within this series, I, Magilim the Magnificent, will take you on a guided tour of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition monster manual. In each episode, I will select a creature, give you a rundown of its mythological and historical background, talk about some of the thematics that are involved in this creature, and finally give some examples on how you might be able to use it in your own games in order to spice up encounters or the storytelling. Now, for our inaugural episode, I've chosen a creature which I think has a lot of potential, especially for low-level gameplay. This, of course, being the Harpy. Now, when we take a look at the Harpies as they're presented within the monster manual, it's quite obvious that these are creatures which, on the face of it, are bird-human hybrids. And there's actually quite a few mythologies that make use of this idea. We have creatures like the bar bird from Egyptian mythology, a manifestation of the human spirit, or an element of it, that is free to roam about after the person dies. An alternative creature one might consider would be Garuda from Hinduism. This legendary being is a birdman or bird, depending on the incarnation, and he serves as the mount of the god Vishnu, and it's legendary quick and swift, and is a vigilant defender against evil. Now, whilst there are many other bird-human hybrids, there are two in particular that are important for understanding the Harpy as it's presented in the monster manual. These, of course, being the Harpy, and also the Siren. Now, both these creatures come from Greek mythology, and to truly understand them best, I think it's best we start with the Siren. Now, the Siren appears most prominently within the story of the Odyssey. This is Odysseus' long journey home after the Trojan War. At one point during his journey, he meets the goddess Circe, and she warns him of the danger of the island of the Sirens, where these creatures live, and they'll lure people in with their beautiful songs, and then they'll crash their boat and promptly die. Now, she tells him that in order to avoid this gruesome fate, he should plug his crew's ears with beeswax, and is even nice enough to give him a lump of it. However, she also knows that he is very curious, and says that should he wish to hear the song of the Sirens himself, and hear this most rapturous of musics, then he can leave his ears unplugged. But he must tie himself to the mast of the ship, so he won't jump overboard and drown himself trying to get to the Sirens. Now, he naturally does this because, as I said, he is a curious man. When they go past the island, his crew see for what they are, these horrific, monstrous creatures which will kill them. Odysseus, however, does not see this. He sees the most lovely, gorgeous women he has ever laid eyes upon, more beautiful than Helen of Troy. And when he hears their song, they sing to him of peace and safety and knowledge and calm, things he is desperate for after a war. He desperately wants to escape and get to them, but of course he can't because he is tied to the mast. Now this serves as sort of the most iconic appearance of the Sirens, and really the one which has defined a lot of aspects of them. We see ideas coming up in myths about mermaids later on, which do similar things with luring souls to their death with lovely songs. And the Harpies within the monster manual do the same. But what of the Harpies themselves? Now, Harpies are something altogether different to Sirens. Unlike Sirens, they are actually explicitly described to be bird women. The Sirens are never actually truly described in the original text of the Odyssey, but Harpies are. Now, Harpies aren't just bird women. They are the incarnation and manifestation of the wind, specifically sudden gales and storm winds that will just knock your shit over, I don't know, destroy your dinner plates. They just real fuckos. Wait, what do you mean slander? They appear quite prominently within the story of the Argonauts, in particular when describing what happened to King Phineus of Thrace. Now, King Phineus had a gift of prophecy given to him by the gods, and he turned it against the gods, and this really pissed off Zeus. And that's the second worst thing you can do to Zeus. And the worst thing you can do is be attractive to Zeus, because that will make your fate much worse. Now, to punish King Phineus, he trapped him upon an island. He rendered him essentially immortal and struck him blind. So, whilst he was immortal, he still needed to eat. And there was no food on the island, except for one source, a beautiful, lavish feast, greater than any that you would ever eat in your life. So, King Phineus was left to stumble blindly towards this feast, but as soon as he actually got to it, the Harpies would swoop down, eat everything they could, and then just chuck everything else on the ground because they were dicks. This basically meant there was no food for Phineus, and he was constantly stuck in a state of starving and torment, and just being teased by the gods. A real cruel sort of punishment, but the gods are known for that. Now, in some stories, the Harpies are chased off, and in some they die. It kind of varies, but in the end, they're gotten rid of. But this isn't the only appearance of Harpies. They also sometimes were known to drag people to the Erinyes for punishment, or they would just take them to Tartarus themselves, and torch them a little bit along the way, just for the fun of it, this actually gives them ties to both Zeus and Hades, two major gods. So they're not just monsters, they are divine beings, or at least semi-divine beings. Now, this sort of gives you a mythological background on the creatures, but where does that leave us with thematics? Well, there's one really obvious thematic that comes to mind, and that is that of desire. When I say desire, I don't just mean, ooh, I'm a sexy lady, come get some. No, I mean just desire for anything you might want, anything you're desperate for, anything you need. This is a really fun thing to play with at a table, especially at low levels, which is where Harpies appear coincidentally. When you have a PC be charmed by a Harpy, don't just say, oh, they have a lovely song, you have to walk towards them. No, say to the PC what the Harpies are promising them. What is the one thing they would ignore all logic, reason, and safety for to go towards? What's that one thing they need? Are they after gold? Are they after glory? Are they after revenge? Is there a loved one missing? Are they missing their home? It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, the Harpies say they have it. And this is really fun because it gets the table to understand what drives each other's PCs more. It opens up roleplay opportunities and can help build group cohesion. And that's really important at the early stages of a campaign. Now that's the first thing you could look at for the Harpies within Dungeons & Dragons, and the one that draws the most from the Sirens. What about something that draws from the Harpies themselves? Well, why don't we look at the idea of freedom? Harpies are people with wings. They're bird-human hybrids. And that's just the classic dream of humanity, isn't it? To look at the sky and want to be able to soar amongst it, to be able to separate oneself from the earthly tether and fly free. And freedom and speed are very much emphasized, especially within the stat block. You encounter them at low levels, and they are a flying monster, and one that's probably going to be outspeeding most of your party. And this sort of mechanically represents the idea that they are quite quick, quite hard to pin down. But what if we look at the way you can sort of weave that into a story? What if you have a Harpy who can't fly? What if you have one that's been punished for some reason or another and is chained to the ground? Then your party might decide to give it a hand. They might decide to free it. You can have it be a good Harpy, you don't have to have them be evil. You create the world as the DM, not the book. The book is a nice recommendation.
Mind you, it is a pretty good guideline, it's kind of useful, you know.
Now, if the party chooses to free this Harpy which has been tied down, maybe it becomes an ally. Maybe it'll help deliver messages or contact their other allies somewhere else in the world. It gives them an agent that they can contact and another NPC you can tie into them. And parties like having more points of contact, especially ones who will do them favors. But what if you just want to play the straightforward bad guy Harpies? What if you want them to be oppressing the freedom of others? Now, picture a prison. It's one that's situated in the middle of a beautiful meadow. You can see towns just on the horizon. Freedom is at your arm's reach. There's not even any gates, no locks, no anything. People can wander out whenever they want, but every time they do, a dozen Harpies swoop down and sing them back inside. Then you end up with your own sort of Greek punishment, where these people are constantly teased with freedom they just can't reach. And that's a really fun sort of setup. Now, those are two sort of ideas. You have desire and you have freedom. But what if we want to play them in the way that Harpies are used at other times, as these sort of divine agents? Well, you might not have every god being involved, but you do have powerful figures, like your big bad. What if there has been a town that's defied them, perhaps by sheltering your heroes? Your big bad might not want to wipe out the town, perhaps it's got useful resources. Perhaps they're not the kind to just kill everyone, instead they want to control and rule. Then, rather than sending their armies to crush the whole town, maybe send their Harpies to punish it. The Harpies might go and swoop down to steal livestock or to burn crops, maybe kidnap children, just do things to make these people's lives hell. And then your party gets the idea that maybe they should defend the town, help out the town as it's helped them out. And think of a really interesting encounter, even at higher levels, where you're just dealing with swarms and swarms of these Harpies, all going for some goods or for something in particular in the town. And your party's goal is not to wipe them all out, but just defend it for long enough. And that's not just their lives at stake, but instead the safety and happiness of people who might rely upon them and people who they might care about. And that's a really sort of fun setup and a more powerful encounter. Now, of course, these are just a few examples I've come up with. I have one more to give you, and it's a more solid plot hook. You can stick around if you want to hear it for use in your own campaigns, or if you just want to listen to more of my lovely voice. Either way, I hope you enjoy. The Ocean Song Opera House was a fool's errand. Thoreau had heard that from his critics a dozen times over. Each time he responded carefully, with shy optimism. He hid his gleeful grin behind an innocent facade. No one would expect a small seaside village like Eel Bay to be able to support such an extravagance. Of course, no one but Thera knew that this venture was no gamble at all. He spent months securing funds, building the stage and sewing the costumes, but eventually the opera house opened its doors wide. There was no crowd, not at first. Just a few curious fishers and dusty travellers. They were sold tickets for cheap. The show they received surpassed any they'd ever dreamed of. Music so enchanting that it touched their hearts, transporting them away from the mundane world to the heavens of the gods themselves. The fishers returned the next night, and the travellers spread the word. Over months, the opera house's business boomed. Eventually, the small-town fishermen could no longer afford to enter the ocean song as the prices rose. But that was fine. Wealthy travellers and nobilities came from far and wide, packing out its seats to catch a glimpse of the mysterious diva of the ocean song, and to be enchanted by her voice for an eve. Just as Thera knew they would, for they gave themselves willingly. It was all too easy to keep the diva's true nature a secret. After all, none can see feathers under layers of fine silks, and the clank of chains was all too easy to pass off as the jangle of jewellery. Some nights, the diva deserved a reward, and Thera would pick a lucky customer to get a backstage meeting with her. They enjoyed every moment of it, until her claws dug into their throat. Thera always had faith in his plan, for what better to ensnare fools than a fool's errand? Hey, I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in to watch this episode. I really enjoyed making it, and I hope you all enjoyed watching it too. If you did, I wouldn't mind if you drop a subscribe or a comment. If there's any particular monsters you'd like to see me cover in future, then let me know, and I might get around to those too. Thanks.